What's up, guys? It's Ben with 2020 election predictions, and today I'm really excited to be doing my Senate predictions in an updated version. I did a video like this 3 weeks ago, but I think some things have changed. Some new polls have come out. The coronavirus has thrown everything into flux. And before I get started, I want to remind you that I'm doing my giveaway on May 15th if I get to 250 subscribers. So please subscribe if you want to be eligible for that. 3 of my lucky subscribers will get a special surprise. And I noticed that over 80% of my viewers are not subscribers, so I don't know what y'all are doing. So please subscribe right here if you haven't already. So just jumping right into this, I just want to start explaining why I think New Hampshire, Minnesota, and New Mexico are all likely Democratic states. Although, especially in Minnesota and New Hampshire, President Trump did very well in the 2016 election, he still lost these states, and the incumbent Democrats in all three of these states are fairly popular. Amy Klobuchar um, won re-election in the midterms by like 25 points here in 2018, and while the incumbent Democrat here will not win by the same margin, it'll likely be smaller. The Democratic senator is going to win re-election, even if President Trump wins Minnesota, which I think he can. Okay, now moving on to these states that I think are likely Republican. The first state I want to start with is Kansas. And a lot of people think that, Kansas is a solid Republican state, which it is, but it is likely that Chris Kobach is going to win the nomination to be U.S. Senator for the Republicans, and he lost the governor's race in 2018. It shocked a lot of people, and it's mainly just because he's very controversial, very hawkish on immigration, and there's a large effort by the Republican establishment to stop Chris Kobach from getting the Republican nomination here, but I think it is likely that he wins it just because of his name recognition. And moving on to Texas, this was a fairly competitive race in 2018 between Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz, but Ted Cruz was not a very popular candidate. He got a lot of media attention in 2016, and even a lot of people who voted for Trump in Texas probably just because Trump bashed Ted Cruz so much, they weren't super enthused to vote for him in 2018. But with President Trump on the ballot and John Cornyn, who's the Republican incumbent, he's going to win this state probably by 5 points or more, even though the demographics in Texas are changing rapidly. Next up is Kentucky. This is a race that's been talked a lot about in the media just because Mitch McConnell is the second most unpopular senator, I believe. He's just kind of the boogeyman for the Democrats. They love dunking on Mitch McConnell. But Kentucky normally is solidly Republican. It is also a state like Kansas that has a Democratic governor in the 2019 election. But I do think on the national stage, like in Kansas, there's just more conservative, more registered Republicans. They will vote Mitch McConnell for his fourth term, I believe. But a lot of money is going to be poured into this race, and the Republicans might be distracted by this race and pour money into this race just to solidify it, and they could use that money elsewhere. So it could hurt them nationally, even though they're probably going to win it. Next up is Georgia. And this is not the special election, but just the election at large that was supposed to happen in 2020 with David Perdue. He is one of the most popular Republican senators, not many scandals with him at all. And the people of Georgia like him, even though Georgia is increasingly becoming a swing state. South Carolina, there's been talks about that Lindsey Graham is actually losing in some polls. In fact, I was on Real Clear Politics. It wasn't up here before, but it was an ad for Lindsey Graham's challenger that he was ahead of Lindsey Graham in the polls, which I still don't think is true. Maybe it was kind of a blip. Lindsey Graham's going to win this seat just because South Carolina is so conservative. It is between two swing states, but South Carolina is a state that votes for Republicans. I mean, they have Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham, and I just don't see them voting for a Democrat. Okay, so next up, I want to move up to the lean Democratic states. And the first one I want to look at is Colorado. John Hickenlooper is the Democratic candidate for Senate here, and Cory Gardner is the Republican incumbent. I think like the one poll that's come out of here has John Hickenlooper up by 15 points. I don't think he's going to win by that margin, but John Hickenlooper, the former governor of Colorado, is very loved by the people of Colorado, and he got a lot of name recognition running for president, I think. And Cory Gardner kind of won off a fluke in 2014. The incumbent Democrat was there was a lot of scandal with some national defense stuff, and it was also a wave year for Republicans. And especially as we become more polarized in Colorado, is a state that President Trump lost by 3 points in 2016. Will probably lose again by a similar margin. I don't think Cory Gardner can hold on. And the only reason I'm putting it in the lean column and not the likely Democratic column is because Cory Gardner is the Republican incumbent. Next up is Arizona. I'm actually putting that in the lean Democratic column. This might surprise some people. Maybe some people would say I should put it in the tilt column, which I can see that argument. But the polls have consistently, and this is a state that's been polled a lot, have Martha McSally down to John Kelly by anywhere between 7 to 10 points. And frankly, Martha McSally is not a great candidate. She ran in 2018 and lost to Kristen Sinema. And then after John McCain died, rest in peace, they gave the governor of Arizona appointed Martha McSally, which I think is not a winning strategy. I'm going to do a later video focusing just on the state of Arizona, but I think it's just a middle finger to the people of Arizona by putting the person that lost, who they voted, who they didn't vote for, as a senator. And John Kelly is a very popular guy. He's an astronaut, for Pete's sake. So now going to the lean Republican states, the first one I want to look at is Alabama. I think Alabama could even be a likely state, but with Doug Jones as the incumbent Democrat when he won the special election in 2017, I mean, that was a whole fluke. Roy Moore was the only Republican that could have lost that race. And with Tommy Tuberville, he's the former Auburn coach, I expect him to do very well in the state, to beat Jeff Sessions in the primary, considering he's endorsed by President Trump, and win the Senate race by around 10 points. And it will for sure help having President Trump on the ballot. He can ride on his coattails and win the state by 10 to 15 points, probably. I mean, and the only reason I'm putting it in the lean column, not the likely column, is same with the reason why I'm putting Colorado in the lean and not the likely. Just because I think they're very similar. They have very vulnerable incumbents. Next up is Montana. Montana putting in the lean Republican column. Steve Bullock is the Democratic challenger against Steve Daines. And Steve Bullock, although he's a Democrat in a state that is more Republican than Democrat, he was a governor. He had really high approval ratings as a governor, and he won re-election as a governor in 2016 when President Trump was on the ballot and outperformed President Trump by like 25 points. So I think that definitely shows that voters just in general can differentiate between state elections and national elections. I think because this is a national election and President Trump will be on the ballot, that Steve Daines will win re-election. I mean, he's not necessarily a super known senator, but he also doesn't have high disapprovals. And I know Montana, John Tester got reelected in 2018, but I think if John Tester, like Steve Bullock, was on the ballot in 2020, that John Tester would have lost. And so I expect it to be the same. Then lastly, moving to the state of Iowa, I think it's leaning Republican. Although Joni Ernst is not a very popular senator, President Trump won Iowa by between 8 and 10 points, and I expect him to have a similar margin, even if President Trump's margin is a little lower just because I think Joe Biden will be a more popular candidate in the state of Iowa. Joni Ernst will probably win the state between 2 and 4 points, and the Democratic challenger is not super strong. Doesn't have a lot of name recognition. I actually don't even know who the Democratic challenger is off the top of my head. Okay, so next, moving into the tilt states. Michigan, I actually have tilting Democratic. I'm very high on John James, the Republican challenger. A lot of people probably have the state as leaning to the Democrats, but I think John James is going to outperform the polls. I think he's going to give the keynote speech at the Republican National Convention and get a lot of media attention. And the incumbent Democrat isn't super popular. And with President Trump on the ballot, I think that that it will help John James for sure. And then next up for the tilt states is the special election in Georgia. And right now, I think I might move this to the lean column later. But Georgia is becoming more of a swing state, and Kelly Loeffler, who's the incumbent Republican, it's a little bit similar to Martha McSally, where she was appointed by the Governor Brian Kemp, and I'll do a whole separate video on this, but she's getting challenged in the Republican primary by Doug Collins, who I predict will win this seat. If it becomes evident that Doug Collins is solidified as the Republican candidate for Senate here, then I expect it to be a lean or likely because he's a lot more popular in Georgia than Kelly Loeffler. But just because there's so much uncertainty right now, I have this as a tilt Republican. So this is the map how I see it right now. I'm going to leave Maine and North Carolina as toss-ups because, frankly, I think they're just so close right now. Well, you know what? I'll split hairs, and I will tilt these to either way. But as you can see, I feel pretty confident that the Republicans are going to keep at least 50 seats. And depending on who's the vice president, who wins the presidency, I could see this meaning that the Democrats are going to get control over the Republicans, and this definitely matters. But I feel like that the Republicans and Democrats are going to split these 2 seats. Right now, looking at all the data, I think Tom Tillis is very, very narrowly going to keep his seat in North Carolina. And as the data shows, I think Susan Collins is going to very narrowly lose this seat in Maine. She is the number one disapproved of senator in her own state. And I think being a moderate in a state that typically leans Democratic helps, but a ton of money is going to be poured in this state. And while her Kavanaugh voting yes for Kavanaugh, I think protected her from a Republican challenger in the primary, I think it's going to be hard for her to defend that, especially in a state that has more registered Democrats than Republicans. But obviously, these 2 states can change on a daily basis, just depending on how I feel and what the data looks like. So as you can see, it's 51 Republicans to 49 Democrats. And for some of my next videos, I'm going to just focus on some certain states like North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan, the states that I really think will matter in 2020. So thank you for watching, and please subscribe right here if you haven't already. Thanks.